In the marketing communications landscape, commercial sponsorships are often viewed as somewhere between invaluable marketing tools and a chairman's whim. Fortunately, this is beginning to change, with sponsorships maturing from mere bit players to playing genuine and major roles in delivering commercial returns and benefits. But how do we know when it's done correctly and efficiently? Salesandmedia.com decided to ask some experts and try and find out what really makes sponsorships commercial.
Hi, this is Paul Gardner, and today I'm talking to Brad Fanning, who's the Strategic Partnerships Manager for BetEasy. Hi, Brad.
Go, Paul.
What does the Strategic Partnerships Manager for a betting firm do?
Well, Paul, it was a few years back when BetEasy was started with Matthew Tripp. Matt brought me on board to try and establish some relationships across all of our non-commercial partners that we will deal with. And particularly, I got given the Northern Territory, where we were licensed and regulated at the time, to be an area of interest and where I concentrated most of my effort at. So I sort of deal with a lot of the stuff that are non-commercial core partnerships for our firm.
Brad, you've had a few name changes. I mean, you've been Sporting Bet, and you've been Crown Bet, and you've been BetEasy. I mean, how does that affect the marketing? I mean, obviously branding is such an important part. Is it go back and start again at the beginning, so snakes and ladders, or can you keep building on what was already there?
Yeah, I think the marketing team and the executive have done an enormous job with us over the time. And as you know, some of the name changes have been because Matthew and the Tripp Group have sold businesses and then acquired others. So some were forced upon us. Others have been with partnerships for Crown Resorts, for example, where we established their online wagering brand. So when Crown divested out of us, that they were looking for other interests and concentrating on their land-based businesses, that name change was forced upon us. So you have a patchwork of different strategies that will get you through, but the brand awareness, especially in current times, is a huge component. You try to bring it along with everyone for the ride, and the executive and Matt Tripp and now Andrew Menz have done an enormous job with that across the board.
I'd imagine that over the journey over the three different names, and even now today you see it, that there's been a big change in the mix between racing and non-racing sports. I mean, how has the recent COVID-19 affected your revenue number?
It's been a significant challenge, and I suppose the adaptability of the business and how agile we are in the digital space. In some ways, you end up being a bit protected in that we do exist online only, whereas other businesses in our space have retail presences. We were lucky in that respect, but obviously with the world sport starting to, and then Australian sport starting to get decimated by serious government action, you then start to lose product to bet on. The racing industry, in particularly Racing Victoria and Racing New South Wales, have done an enormous job to keep the show on. And in that respect, it's possibly a little bit back to the old. Racing has become a huge part of our. It was always a huge part, but it's even more so now. Can help us get through. I'm in my, I think, become third or fourth week of being out of the office now, and which is not unusual for me. I do a lot of this time on the road, but across the board to pick up 450 plus staff, and within sort of 3 to 5 days have them all completely working digitally and remotely has been a credit to those guys.
If you could buy shares in a business, you'd be buying shares in Zoom right now. I imagine it's going to go through the roof.
Absolutely.
Prior to COVID-19, what percentage would be racing and what percentage would be other sports?
Yeah, I think racing, we're predominantly, racing still drives wagering. I think, the growth of sports have been specific over a long time, and they've sort of eaten into racing's dominance. But across the board now, with all the sports shutting down, sort of like it is a bit of a time warp, and we are back to being, it's in racing we trust and racing we hold. So that's where it's been so important that the racing is, and racing employs, there's 50,000 staff. It's not just in our space being the wagering providers, but from stable hands to truck drivers to barrier attendants to track work jockeys to race callers and production and across the board, racing has done really well to keep going, although without crowds. But it's they've done themselves very proud. So predominantly racing's still the biggest component, but now racing's unless you're wanting to bet on online video games or a little bit of very obscure sport from table tennis and a few other ones that are just surviving. It's pretty much all racing. So I generally work in that component of the business. I'm more in relationships with our non-commercial partners, providing outcomes and going that way.
So do you report into a marketing function, Brad, or is it your own separate vertical? How does it work?
Yeah, it's just changed. So I'm sort of coming up to my 6th year or 7th year, I think, now. And for the first 6 or 5.5 years of those, I was my own silo within the marketing department, reporting straight to the CMO, but probably off the back of a strong relationship with our CEO and often with our head of legal or head of commercial, dealing with those guys in relation to some specific aspects of when we're looking to do some things across with our we're licensed and regulated out of the Northern Territory, so they were the functions that I was predominantly working on. I worked from time to time with stakeholder groups to try and get some win-win outcomes. But then just recently we formed, since Matt Tripper's moved across to a president's role, which is it's an interesting title.
Sadly, not President of the United States.
No, exactly. So the Stars Group, having that Canadian and a sort of global structure that they wanted to, as Matt relinquished he's been the CEO, he's moved across to being a president as his earn-out continues. And we've started a department of the CEO. So myself and a few of the corporate affairs guys sit in that space.
Brad, if you just to talk on the marketing before we get to sponsorship in general, I mean,
for sure,
there's hardly a ad break go by, especially around sports or where there's not an ad for a sporting company. I mean, obviously, marketing is a critical piece. Is it mainly just in terms of recruiting new people or reinforcing or encouraging turnover? What's the basic role of the marketing of a sporting company?
Yeah, I think brand awareness is certainly a very big one. There was a time where other players in the market saturated it, and unfortunately, can end up at a stage where they're pushed to certain time frames, and the perceptions of them went too far, I think. So this is only from our point of view, and I haven't dealt in that space. It's more a personal opinion than anything else. You've got to try and strike the right balance, but then when others are competing in that space, you've got to then make sure that you can. It's going to be very interesting now, Paul, how this all breaks down when we do come out of the current times. But as I say, my space has been more dealing with some of the more fun elements of the business, where I can deal with some of the great wares and likes of the NT.
So let's talk about some of the sponsorships you have. What are the obviously Northern Territory? What are the main sponsorships? There's obviously they sponsor various races or race courses.
It's broken down that traditionally the majority of the corporate bookmakers are in the licensed regulator out of the Northern Territory. So I think that's very crucial to then put a spotlight. The Northern Territory, in my opinion, is a gold standard of regulatory and online wagering. It's not there is a misconception that there is a tax advantage. There certainly has been competitively taxed, but now with the point of consumption tax coming across Australia, our space has been we've taken hits like everyone else. But the stuff that I do is probably to highlight the Northern Territory, and we've picked up the sponsoring for the naming rights of the V8 Supercar race. So for 3 seasons, that was the CrownBet Darwin Triple Crown. So they run a race on the Saturday for points in the supercar, the highest category of supercar, and then the V8 supercars, and then they have a shootout on the Sunday, and then they have another race, a longer race on the Sunday. And no one had ever won the Triple Crown until Scott McLaughlin got that done. So from that point of view, That's one of the biggest drivers in the Darwin tourism, and that's why I work very close with Northern Territory Tourism and Northern Territory Major Events and Tim Watson and Andrew Hopper. The Darwin Race Carnival, so the horse racing carnival in Darwin and the V8 Supercars would be the two biggest events in Darwin that go around every year. So for us to have secure one of those on a longer term arrangement's been great for us and great for the NT.
And you also sponsored the $1 Million Fish as well.
Yeah, so that's probably been my baby from the start. I was probably 7 years ago. I didn't know much about Lats calcara for the hydroline hermaphrodite, which is actually barramundi, a protagonistic species. But
That sounds sexier when you say barramundi, just quietly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's barramundi. So the great sporting fish from the NT. We were approached many years ago, and there were some thoughts by some very senior NT businessmen and NT government to try and have a golden ticket type competition, and that was given to me, and I possibly worked on that for 6 to 8 months, where our business pretty much just put me aside to work on a concept and design. I worked very closely with Adam Coward, a fantastic marketer who was the Chief Marketing Officer of Tourism Northern Territory. He's ended up at U-Foods, and he's a very dynamic operator. Him and I, with a couple of others, Matt Hayden, the Australian cricketer, became our ambassador for it as well. I pretty much devised the what has become Australia's greatest fishing competition, and probably in the Northern Territory, it's a major event. And so we gave it a go for 1 year, and that story has been quite phenomenal. It's the success of $1 Million Fish has been freight train like, and we're only growing it. We've just finished our 5th season as of 11:59 on the 31st of March, and we've given away close to $400,000. And
wow,
yeah, we've ended up probably providing. We've had Shimano, we've had Qantas, the Darwin Casino sponsoring us now. We've had some huge national brands, and the fishing space across the board is probably one that TIO Insurance, Club Marine, Anaconda. We've also had BCF in the past, Great Northern Brewery. Then we've had sort of the two major brewing brands fight each other to get involved. I think the NT is iconic for fishing, and the numbers and the stuff we've done around $1 Million Fish has been fantastic.
And for people listening who love fishing, the $1 Million Fish has still not been caught.
That's correct. So yeah, as I can tell you, as of today, we redid our deal a while back, and we turned all the seasons 1 to season 3 $1 Million numbers back on.
Okay.
So wow. There's 6 current fish swimming around the Northern Territory with a red tag in their dorsal fin. The competition starts on the 1st of October and runs through to the 31st of March. But we continue the $1 Million numbers on through the whole year. So although the NT is currently shut at the moment, there's probably not getting much fishing effort. If someone catches one of those, they're going to make themselves, they're going to have an amazing day. With that, we also then every season add another 100 $10,000 tags. So 2 red tag prizes. If you've picked up a red tag and it's within the season, you've either won 10 grand or you've won $1 million. And then in the post season, in the off season, we split the season into 6 months lots. So it's in the post season, if you catch one of the 6 numbers, you've won $1 million. And we've just let the guys know that season 5, so it says S5 MDF 5501 was the one unique tag for season 5. That find that tag somewhere around the NT waterways, you'll catch $1 million. I had an interesting story I met a guy who's worked with us the whole time, Bill Sauna. He's genuinely the Don Bradman of fish tagging data science. And he reported a recapture to me, and he had a fish that was released at Borroloola and tagged in a program that was designed to check the health of the MacArthur River at Borroloola. He's had a fish caught which has been out for 10 years. And it was caught on the Queensland side of the border. So that fish had gone, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometres, and then was re-caught just recently. So the $1 million numbers, I've had 2 or 3 fish this year caught from season 1. I think the longest that I can recall off the top of my head was a fish that was in the water for 1,200 days.
You're insured? Is there
No, we
insurance
can't
against?
insure it. No, so we tried for Matt
So I thought
Stewart.
this is all cash that
It's
disappears
all cash
from
that sits
BD,
on the BetEasy balance sheet and used to sit
and
on
it's
the Crown.
$500,000 has gone off already.
Exactly right. Yeah, that close to $500,000, and we've also tipped a lot of stuff into the health of the fishery, and it's been a phenomenal success. We've had, I think, year two we might have had 45,000 registrants, all over 18, free to register. Over $100,000 worth of prizes. We've had Jayco involved. All the prizes are just for registering, and then Tourism Northern Territory get that data and can send some EDMs and send some holiday offerings to the NT and show the people that are interested in fishing and camping in the outdoors.
Brad, it strikes me it doesn't have much to do with betting. So there's obviously in some of the sponsorships you're choosing, especially around Northern Territory, there's a strong community service and spirit about it. Is that a fair way how you evaluate the sponsorships that come across your desk?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm sort of lucky that mine can sometimes end up being the commercial aspects, one aspect that the executive and that my boss and others have to tick off from. But the community access and to highlight the Northern Territory where we're licensed and regulated from is also as equal part to that. So that's certainly something we've $1 million fishers had. I think last year, a couple of years ago, they've over $25 million worth of advertised space rate. We've had the ABC News cover it on their national news every year. We've had Sunrise, Today Show, and those sorts of things. Carl Stefanovic did a big thing when Today was shooting out of the NT, the wharf down there at the waterfront. So yeah, that's been amazing. But I think to highlight the territory, it sort of gives me a unique perspective, and then you can then sort of add some win-wins. And you don't necessarily have to see that through the lens of what's just in it for us. It's what's probably in it for our industry and what's in it for the broader Northern Territory community.
So how do you measure ROI then? So when it comes each year, obviously we're going to get out of this coronavirus disaster eventually. We're going to sit down and go, okay, now if we haven't got the revenues there, we should be cutting costs. Let's look at sponsorship. Brad, tell me, is it worth it or not to continue on? I mean, how do you measure ROI and something like that?
Yeah, I think you've got to use a lot of different metrics to get that. It will be an interesting landscape that we're going to get to post Corona. I think some of my projects won't get up, others will. I can surely say that the $1 million fish has been a huge economic driver to the NT, so that's one that I'll be very confident. We're committed to that. Long term. Yeah, to measure ROI, you've got to look at a lot of different brand awareness, within the Northern Territory, and then also to have those relationships that when you do want to look at other things, you can then call on some of those relationships. And often, as you know in business as well, Paul, that you work with people because you want to work with people, and sometimes that can then be, well, we give up on this one and we get something back on the other one. And through those sorts of projects, we've ended up picking up Carbine Club sponsorships out of the NT, Starball for the Starlight Foundation, which has been a really you look at sick kids in the Starball, and and you've got a couple of tables there, and it certainly puts a few things into perspective. And the territory it's got population issues. So from that point of view, you can get around it, but they do need as much help as they can. And I think that's why they've done what they have with borders, coronavirus, time. But their time will come again. They'll open up, and it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. That's for sure.
So when you look at the your competitors, for instance, you've got Ladbrokes Park and various other naming races, and you guys are going the other way, which is more community, which is quite interesting sponsorships.
I think you've got to have a balance of that. I think Ed Owens and our executive have done a good job. I'm probably fortunate that I'm into my space and others into theirs, and we have a different lens that we look through. At for AFL sponsorship or name right sponsorships of horse racing tracks or all those things. So you can't just put all your eggs in one basket in relation to one path. I think you've got to try to cover and be as broad as you possibly can, and then look to then get some win-wins for both parties. And if you're doing that, you're setting yourself up to be a bit more diverse and more competitive and more agile.
I'd imagine that apart from the Northern Territory Tourism, you'd probably be the biggest sponsor in the Northern Territory, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we'd certainly be one of them. I think there are some very big iconic brands. The NT, often they punch a lot above their weight in certain aspects. There's some phenomenal business stories away from our industry up there. The Pasquale family and Pasquale Pearls head office is there.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, they've also done some great stuff with Hermes and the crocodile skins that Mick Burns has been doing, some big mining interests and what have you. But typical, the Territorians are probably very similar to what Australians sort of see themselves that, on a world stage, as you've operated, at length, Paul, that Australians can do a lot of great things and they just probably don't then go and beat their chest as hard about it. Whereas Territorians is probably that more similar to Australia. They can do some massive things, but they're powerful businesses and some great businesses, and they've done it tough as well through the Impex boom, and then the post Impex cycle of the gas. That was a phenomenal project. But I've certainly met and got to fall in love with the Territory, and it's something very close to me. Whether the fact that we're licensed and regulated there is just a bonus, for me.
Brad, it's been a fascinating time to talk to you. Thanks for making the time. And now, before I go and get all my rods ready for when they reopen the Northern Territory and I go fishing for $1 million fish, I mean, is there anything that you have on your plate right now that you look at and say, this is the kind of sponsorship I'd love to be doing, but we can't do it at this particular point in time?
Oh, I think collectively across the business, that's going to, when we need to sort of see how long this goes for, and then what the new world order looks post these events. I think it's a matter of reassessing it all, but there's nothing that's specifically in mind. I'm sure across the broader aspects of the business, there'll be a lot of decisions made, but if everyone works together and we can get through this pretty quickly, it's certainly an interesting time, and there'll be a lot smarter people writing many books, and this will be studied for 10, 20, if not 50 and 100 years down the track of how we got through this crisis. And I think if everyone does it together, we can reset the place and end up with a bit of a better world.
I think it'll take us that long to pay it off too. So Brad Fanning, who's the Strategic Partnerships Manager for BetEasy. Thanks for your time, Brad.
Good on you, Paul.